Well, to discuss more on the Summer Olympics, we're now joined by Professor Habib Noorbhai, who is an associate professor at the University of Johannesburg. He also contributes his time as a sports scientist and speaker and humanitarian. He joins us via Zoom from Johannesburg. Professor, what effect does the pandemic and subsequent lockdowns have on sportsmen and women's training and preparations for the Olympics?
Good evening, sir, and thanks for having me. Well, the effects is quite large. It's quite devastating, to be quite honest. And what the viewers need to understand is that athletes and coaches don't just prepare for Olympics over a span of 1 or 2 years. Some of them have even taken more than 4 years or more than 6 years to actually come to a pinnacle of this milestone. And one of the things that we talk about in sports science is periodization, where they've set different cycles, whether it's at mesocycles or macrocycles, smaller goals that lead up to a bigger goal at such an event. And such a hallmark event puts so much of expectations on players and on coaches and on athletes in order to really perform well. So it has devastating effects not only on the athlete's preparation, but as well as in terms of preparations as well and performance optimization during that period. My concern, though, especially coming from an African perspective, is that this COVID-19 pandemic has placed such a huge burden in terms of inequality. We're talking about COVID-19 being nationalized or even inequality in terms of COVID-19 health and prevention, but there's also inequality that exists within different athletes around the world. We're finding that some athletes, despite COVID-19 and by adhering to physical distancing measures, they are still able to train and to prepare based on different types of structures and training facilities that they have. When you go into other types of countries, the resources might not be the same. So we are actually facing a huge inequality equilibrium. And at the same time, it's placing a huge toll on the preparation and the training effects on athletes leading up to such a hallmark event.
And Professor, still on that subject, it seems that organizers and leading figures in sport, such as the World Athletics President Seb Coe, seem to be sending mixed messages on Tokyo 2020. How does this then affect athletes preparing for the Games?
Well, it's certainly debilitating, because do you put your foot on the pedal or take it off? I mean, there's one thing that comes into preparation, and that's tapering. So do you really prepare and look forward towards a certain goal, and then with the event of it not coming? For example, for many years within this decade, people and athletes have actually been preparing for the Olympics to take place last year. And when this pandemic struck, it has really put them onto the back burner. So even now, with the possible postponement talks, it now at the same time leaves athletes and coaches within a situation of whether they carry on with their periodization plans, with their training programs, with their different preparations, logistics. I mean, there's so much that goes into preparing for such an event. And this is the Olympics. So there's so much that goes into place there. So, but the other thing that's really a concern as well is, again, from this instance, how do we measure the concepts of business versus health? The public in Japan probably want to protect the health of their people, because such hallmark events bring in many people in terms of spectators and different stakeholders. So do we protect the health of people from this virus potentially surging with different waves coming in, with different variants that are being introduced? Or do we safeguard the business of the Olympics and the organizers, as well as the athletes and coaches who are training to compete at this prestige stage? So it's a tough one to balance, but I'm always of the opinion, scientifically, to put health first, because although it's going to really put economical burdens on those involved with the Olympics, at the same time, we really need to try our utmost best to curb this pandemic, in which this virus is still at its nascent stage, and there is still a lot that we do not know about.
All right, Professor, thank you very much for your insights. Professor Habib Noorbhai, Associate Professor at the University of Joburg, joining us live from Joburg.